This is the space where we're growing our Jerusalem artichokes. It's perpendicular to the slope, single row. The irrigation goes this way, the slope goes that way, and the drip lines do not reach to the end of the Jerusalem artichoke row, with the idea that we don't want them to be directly irrigated and just have residual moisture from watering the other crops here in those beds. You can see that we have already cut the stems and used them to mulch some of our young hazel seedlings, but the density of the stems here in this patch is very different to here. You can see how much more stems there are here, and proportionally most of them are with smaller diameter, and here they're further apart but way thicker. The reason for this is that last winter when I harvested the Jerusalem artichokes, I harvested from here up to about here, and we basically didn't need any more, and that was left unharvested. So this patch was just replanted by returning to the soil random pieces of sunchokes, and this was not replanted. And I already harvested a bit here down at the end to just confirm my suspicion that the ones which we didn't harvest, they grew smaller and tightly packed more deformed tubers, while those here grew larger and larger in volume and in count tubers. And I'm preparing this row now. By the end of this row, the Jerusalem artichokes are constantly trying to encroach on that space, because here the meadow is trimmed or mown with a lawnmower, but here are the crops. So here the soil is fluffier, so the Jerusalem artichokes are constantly trying to move in that direction, which actually is good for us because we are kind of forced to harvest the ones which go into the beds. And even if we don't harvest the whole row here, we're still harvesting the edges of it, and in this way we maintain the overall area of the Jerusalem artichoke patch, and we get our yearly harvest. Now I've put the phone down to quickly show you this clump which I'm digging out, so I can finish my row here in preparation for the garlic. And you can see that the soil here is moist, it's not sogging wet. Hey Spotty, one of the yard cats. The soil is not sogging wet, but it's still very moist, and it's easy to dig without coming out in large clumps. And the reason for that is that this bed has been dug for planting the French beans. We prepped it, and also compost was added. But when I'm forking the beds in this way and there is some rain falling, it's always easier for the water to quickly penetrate down, as opposed to the regular pathways or the places in the garden which are not dug, where we need many times bigger rainfall in order to saturate the soil because of the density of the clay. So 100 liters of rain are nearly not enough for some of the other uncultivated patches, while here it's perfectly adequate amount to make the soil easily forked and to make the planting of garlic easier for us. And this would have not been enough rain if we didn't prep the bed in spring. So now you can see that this clump came out whole, and I suppose this was a single tuber which I planted here in spring. You can see the amount of Jerusalem artichokes which we can harvest from this single spot. I'll just quickly, I split some of the tubers here because they're so large and I couldn't fully dig them out. So I'll just quickly break apart this clump. And when I'm doing this breaking apart of the clump, I'm just setting aside a couple of tubers which I just don't want to bother process, and I put them back into the soil. Of course, this can be done at later time, and sometimes when I'm just starting harvesting, I harvest everything, and then I come back later, maybe in February, and spread around every 20 centimeters a tuber or two, and this is what we get in return. This row has not been fertilized, of course, in any way. This is not something we do, especially with Jerusalem artichokes, and all of the irrigation it took was indirectly, you can say, by wicking action. Look at the size of that. And it certainly has never been very wet here, but that didn't bother the sunchokes, and they managed to again exceed their 3-meter height, which has been kind of a regular for them. Now there are always split pieces which are left in the ground when I'm digging out, and those usually sprout in spring. More are coming out, and we are kind of pressured into weeding the beds because otherwise the sunchokes are easily taking precedence with their rapid growth. Let me just dig a little bit more here and see if I can reach more tubers, because the more I harvest, the less work I will have in the next growing season. Weeding this patch and removing young plants. You can see that my digging fork has no problem penetrating here, and at 30 centimeters the combs that are coming out are not as wet as the surface layer, but still it's wet enough that no jumping on top of the digging fork is needed. Okay, another big one. Those very uneven shaped tubers are usually a challenge to wash, but we just keep them soaked for a couple of days in a bucket of water, and most of the clay just falls off very easily. And a sharp spray with a hose always helps. This will be the end of today's episode, and you can rest assured that I'll be harvesting much more of those in the coming months. See you in the next one, folks.